Hello horror hounds, welcome back to another instalment of The Films That Scared Me. In a week that's seen long-term subscriber Rachel Sullivan plastering a Facebook horror group with images of Kurt Barlow, I thought the time was right for the second Tobe Hooper movie after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to make it into the Films That Scared Me series. You'll like this video, and this video will like you. It's Salem'S Lot. So confession time for a series of videos that are called The Films That Scared Me. Mr. Barlow in Salem'S Lot never did scare me. Which is weird because he's unquestionably scary looking. He's imposing. When he turns up, he's an absolute palpable threat. His look is clearly modelled on Count Orlok from Nosferatu, who does scare me. Maybe it was just the limitations of wanting this to be an active, threatening, predatory vampire, but working within the restrictions of contact lenses that could only be worn for 15 minutes at a time, and makeup and nails and teeth that kept dropping out and stuff like that. Kurt Barlow, whilst an absolutely vital piece of this particular piece of clockwork, was never the scary element for me in Tobe Hooper's Salem'S Lot. James Mason's turn as his human helper, Richard Straker, creeps me out. In fact, he creeps me out more and more each time I watch the movie. And his line that I tried badly to ape at the start, "You'll enjoy Mr. Barlow, and he will enjoy you," just gets creepier and creepier every time I watch it. Stephen King's novel Salem'S Lot was, if not the first, one of the very first books to scare me. I stayed up in bed reading it one night, and it got to the point where I was too scared to put the book down and turn out the light. So my only other option, it seemed to be a bit of a war of attrition, was just to keep reading, push on through the book until everything was all right again at the end, and the book got scarier and scarier and scarier. The reading of Salem'S Lot and then later on the watching of this movie sort of ran concurrently with a time in my life where, as a young boy, I was obsessed with vampire lore. That's why I used to love the Hammer movies, and Peter Cushing's Van Helsing role, and Fright Night, Peter Vincent, Roddy McDowall in that movie. I used to love the rules and the weapons to use against vampires. That's why I loved Peter Vincent's vampire hunting kit. And naturally in Salem'S Lot, I found a reflection of myself in the character of Mark Petrie, with his love of horror movies and his collection of monster models, and the little cruciform gravestone he snaps off one of his dioramas to use as a makeshift vampire repellent. These films and books from that time all seemed to me to be wonderful how-to guides to defend yourself against vampires. This was only fueled during the mid-80s, during those years, with TV appearances from real-life vampire hunters, occultists, exorcists, self-styled exorcists like Sean Manchester and David Farrant, who seemed to be semi-regularly on TV chat shows talking about their experiences and examples of things like the Highgate vampire and demons and vampire hunting. All of this found very fertile ground in my young teenage imagination. It would be fair to say that in a few years after that, moving from early teens to mid-teens, I sort of shifted allegiance a little bit, and around that time very much wanted to be a vampire rather than a slayer of vampires. But for now, and with Salem'S Lot, as it should be, I think, vampires were a force to be reckoned with and absolutely something to be feared. So let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. Yes, James Mason is creepy AF. Yes, the vampire Mike Ryerson back from the dead and sitting in the rocking chair. Look at me, teacher, with his glow in the dark sort of cat's eyes, gives me shivers. But it's little Ralphie and Danny Glick who earn Salem's Lot a place in my list of films that scared me. Danny hypnotising Mike Ryerson through the coffin lid as the sun goes down whilst the gravedigger is supposed to be filling in that grave. Danny's nocturnal visit to Mark Petrie at his bedroom window, following on from his little brother Ralphie previously visiting him. This was the stuff of my nightmares. Those fingernails on the glass, that freaky floating in the mist, filmed backwards, projected backwards to give an uncanny feeling to the proceedings, and to cap it all off, the look of animal hunger in Danny's eyes as Mark is reaching for the window latch, and previous to that, the look of triumph in Ralphie's eyes as he sweeps into his brother's bedroom and then hovers over him before lunging down to take a bite. That sequence, Ralphie's return, simply put, is one of the scariest sequences ever committed to celluloid. On a very fundamental level, it taps into all sorts of primal things. An innocent looking child that is clearly now something monstrous and evil. So the play between innocence and experience that William Blake talks about in his poems, the dreamlike languor of that smoky floating that sort of hypnotizes us as Danny and then Mark themselves become mesmerized, almost like creatures in the sort of hypnotic sway of the cobra. And finally, and most basically, the stark reality that vampires, when they're done how I like them to be done, turn us humans from predators into prey. Vampires are apex predators, and when we look at them, we should feel like rodents in the shadow of the hawk. And I think that taps into a very old part of our brain that starts firing off those danger signals. And when the mix is right and you're watching a horror film that taps into something that fundamental and primal in you, it's very hard to shake it, and it's very hard to forget it. Ralphie Glick at Danny's window, to my money, in my opinion, is probably, pound for pound, the scariest sequence you can ever see in a horror film. That's just me. You will have other opinions, and I would love to hear them. But rightly, Tobe Hooper finds a second place on the list of films that scare me, and rightly, Salem's Lot earns its seat at the great table. It's not sat outside, scratching at the window, asking to be let in. It's already in, and it's giving you one hell of a hickey